Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. He is Austin Robillard. She is Alex Winley. I'm Ian Heston. Guys, you got to have like goldfish memory, I guess, nowadays when it comes to Inter Miami. Games coming quick and fast, and probably not the results that they would have wanted. Another defeat to Chicago 3-1, their third in a row, but quickly they're right back in action Tuesday against the Columbus Crew. So a lot to talk about. Let's get started with that game against Chicago in the Windy City in a pitch that was borderline unplayable. And if you had seen the NFL game the following day, definitely unplayable after that. A really disappointing performance with all things considered, especially with the time given off, especially understanding the circumstances and what it all meant. Just I guess where do you how quickly can you forget about this, because you're going to have to, and how do you sort of I guess get over what was a really disappointing performance?
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to get over it. They play the Crew on Tuesday, so yeah, it's not something that can just linger on. It was a poor performance. Neville even said as much. Yeah, they looked out of shape. Not out of shape, just literally out of shape in regards to the formation and player personnel. Yeah, it didn't look good, but these games are coming thick and fast now, so we're gonna have to turn a new leaf and focus on Tuesday.
For me, I kind of have the opposite feeling. I say don't get over it because if you look at the last three performances, I don't think this team has played to the standards at all what they need to do to be a playoff team. They've not shown at all. I mean, after the 5 game unbeaten streak, we were saying, yeah, this is a playoff team. They were looking good at fifth, sixth, seventh, and now that they've fallen down the pecking order a little bit, it just seems like they're not playing to the standards that they need to. And I say don't forget about it because I think they're doing a lot of the wrong things offensively. And let me just throw out a stat for you guys. In their previous 5 games before the 3 game losing streak, they had 27 shots on goal. Okay. And that's an average of a little over five, or about 5.5 shots on goal per 90 minutes. That's 9 goals they scored from open play as well with that. So in those 5 games, they scored 9 goals from open play, a couple more from set pieces and penalties, with those 27 shots on target. In the last 3 games, they've only had 9 shots on goal. So they're only averaging 3 shots on goal per 90, and they have not scored a single goal from open play. And that's why I say do not forget about it, because this team offensively, there's something going wrong. And I know that there was the red card to Pozuelo, and then Pozuelo was out, but Pozuelo came back with an extended time off. This team had 10 days off to figure something out against the Chicago side, and they weren't able to do it. And I granted the pitch wasn't well, and all that, but I don't think that Phil Neville, even in his press conference, was saying that they played enough to get a result or they played enough to get anything out of this match. I don't think they played well enough at all. And I think a lot of it has to do with this team going forward. We thought that Nick Marsman could help that. We thought that, this team with Pozuelo coming back to play a full 90 would help that, but they have not figured it out and they have not scored from open play and haven't looked threatening enough to do so or to do so enough to win a match. Yeah. So in my opinion, that's why I say you don't forget about it. You need to build off of this and say, here's what went wrong. Here's what we need to fix going into Tuesday in a must-win game, in my opinion, against Columbus. Because I think if they don't win, they're probably not going to be in the playoffs. I think it's that serious. Then you got to figure something out.
You talked about the goals from open play, and that's really where the crux of this conversation begins, because even with an XG of 1.07 that they had, that's even deceiving because the penalty is 0.75 of that. So really in the first half, they had an XG of 0.17. The second half without the penalty, it's an XG of 0.12. So they're not, it's not even like they're getting these chances and not converting like it was at certain points middle of the way through the season. They're just simply not creating and not scoring when they create, but also never creating. And that's really the only big chance was the penalty all game long for all those 90 minutes. It's tough to put it all on one person, but going back to the Chicago game, the groans are very loud over the play of Indy Vassilev. I think that we need to think about where it comes, more so not to just put it all on his plate, but that right-hand side has been so important to the offense of this iteration of this team all season long. And when they're not able to play through that right flank, oftentimes it's relying too much on Pozuelo, too much on Higuain. You see the body language deteriorate. You see everything almost fall into quicksand. And so that's why that right flank winds up being so important to really be like an escape hatch for any sort of offense to come through, Alex. And it really just seems at times when we're having these conversations of nothing being from open play, not even scoring goals, but like of no creation, right? Because we talk a lot of time about how those when they get down into the corner, those long crosses in are very low percentage crosses. But even then, they're creating. It just seems like there isn't even the ability to create from that right now.
Yeah, I think Vasilev isn't a starter, really. Genuinely, he's a great off the bench option, but right now, how many starts he hasn't really scored. All two of his goals have come from off the bench. Versus Charlotte to get those game winners. So, yeah, right now he's not someone that I would start. I put Robert Taylor there, and then Lassiter on the left. Then we can bring on Vasilev and Emerson later in the games. But right now, Vasilev, he isn't. He's not really putting enough output to become to start really. Robert Taylor looks far more comfortable on the right wing than he does on the left. Lassiter, he's what you're gonna get from him. You get enough pace over the top and whatnot, and that works for Miami because they have a speedy output on the left hand side to get him behind, and you have Robert Taylor who's really keen on just dribbling and finding those little half pockets of space. So yeah, right now Vasilev, I think he's really only in the team because of his defensive work rate, but it's not good enough offensively from him, and I think that's a big talking point. Obviously, I'm not going to put it all on him.
Right.
Obviously, more players need to step up. Higuain, Pozuelo, look, they're the DPs. They need to do better as well. So, it's just a top to bottom. Not good enough for for anyone. Even Neville, some of the tactical things, he was too slow to switch really, and it was just a poor game all around. And that's why I say they should just really just move on and fix it and forget about it and do what correct it, but move on really.
My thing is how do you correct that now with and I know we're just speaking on Vasilev here, but in terms of how they were finding success in that 5-game unbeaten streak, a lot of it had to do with this 5 at the back formation and Taylor on the left flank. And I think that looking now, you saw the 4 at the back because of the injury to Damian Lowe. And then the last time that they actually played a 5 at the back was when they lost to Columbus, but there was no Alejandro Pozuelo. So there's a different factor there. And with no Damian Lowe now and Pozuelo back, do you try and find a way to force a 5 at the back like they did that one time with Kieran Gibbs, or maybe even bring in Ame Mabika and using that? Because if you get let's say if you get Vasilev off the pitch and you play a what is it, a 5-4-1, or you have some or what is it, a 3-5-2, whatever it can be, where you have just Pozuelo and Higuain up front. Maybe you play Yedlin out wide, you play Taylor out wide, and then you stack the midfield with somebody like Bryce Duke or something like that. Would anybody be a beneficiary of that? Because if Vasilev's not playing, do you find more success in that way without Damian Lowe and that security at the back? That's kind of the question that I'm trying to figure out.
I absolutely would. Here's why: because that boxed middle has proven to be successful. When you played Pozuelo and Duke up top, and then Gregory and Mota and bottom, you've controlled that block and that square in the middle, and that's allowed Taylor, like you said, on the left, and Yedlin on the right to get high, and that sort of spreads almost like an arch that almost spreads the entire offense and really creates a really lovely shape that I think can control itself through the spine, especially, and we'll move to Columbus, but especially against a team like Columbus that is going to go so much route one, is going to go so direct. And last time, you saw with a 4 at the back and McVeigh, right? That's how they got beat against Columbus, because McVeigh lost a one-on-one battle, and it was just straight right at you, and they were going to try and run past you, and that was the one way that you did it. So that's why I think with that 5, almost like a 3, but just straight controlling that spine, and then you allow Taylor and Yedlin on the wings to sort of fly up and down. Now all of a sudden I've controlled my middle, I've controlled that, and I'm playing out from there. Phil likes to play that out wide, and you've created a nice sort of natural shape. So I would, for this Columbus game, go towards that, Alex. But I do think, though, team selection is worth talking about, because Phil has mentioned all year long about, and it is not to pick on Vasilev, it's to say that all year long he's talked about the plethora of options. and how deep this team is. That even with a guy like Coco Jean, who is also injured, or Damian Lowe, they have center backs that they could throw in. But especially at winger, you have so many options. And if that's the case, getting it right has to be critical, especially right now. It can't be a question of, one guy had an off night. And that, I understand, puts a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure on getting it right. And you're never going to bat 1,000. But this is the time when you have to, like, this is the clutch at bat, right? To use the baseball analogy. This is the game-winning shot moment. You have to know the guy that you're going to pick is the guy that's going to come through. And for me, like that was the part that was missing with the selection there. Alex, you brought up a very good point of flipping Taylor to the right, of putting Lassiter there for more speed. If you're going to go with a 4 at the back, that makes sense. If you're going to go with a 5 at the back, I still just don't see a place for Vasilev right now, simply because I think that in terms of the options that you have in this moment in time, you need to rely on your big game players. And I think he's a great player with a promising future. I just can't count on it right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're going with that back three option, I would play a 3-4-2-1 with McVay, Mabika, Taylor, Gregory, Mata, Yedlin, then Duke, Pozuelo, Higuain as 2 10s, and Higuain as a 9. If you're going to do that, personally, I would just stick with the back three and play players in their proper position. I'd start Gibbs again, McVay, and Mabika. Really like Ryan Saylor, but there are so many times where he's just a step too slow. I know against Chicago, he got beat during one of the, I don't know, someone was dribbling, but in the penalty area, and he just got beat way too easily. You know, Mabika's taller, longer legs, so that could help. Yedlin again, and I'd start a midfield three of, Gregory Mata, Pozuelo, and then up top would be Lassiter, Higuain, Robert Taylor on the right. So many, like the game against Portland, where I think that was probably the most complete game Miami had, even though they did let up a goal. I think it was when Robert Taylor was on the right, and I believe, and Lassiter was on the left, and they were just, playing through the channels and sending those through balls in, and that's how they found success. And it was probably the most complete game that they played. Attacking wise, I mean, they didn't score a lot, but they looked comfortable doing that. But Neville has always just kept on tinkering. But I think, especially against this Crew side, that can be dangerous when they feel like it. You just go with, if everything isn't working, you go with pace over the top, and you bring in Lassiter and Taylor on his natural side to play alongside Higuain and Pozuelo, because Pozuelo will find them. We've seen it so many times, but the Vasilev against Chicago just didn't work, and I get why he's starting, but and not to pick on him, but it's just Neville not really, I don't know, not really giving him the chance to really succeed. Like, you should know the player's strengths and not really throw him in when, you like these certain qualities, but it just may not work in certain teams. So, they've got to figure it out. But
well, let's look at where they are in the playoff race now, because things have changed a lot and did change a lot this past weekend. Orlando still at 5th with that 42 points. They're now tied with Cincinnati, but Orlando owns the tiebreaker based off of wins. Both teams sitting at 42 points, with Cincinnati playing one game more. Columbus, with 29 played, is 5 points ahead of Inter Miami with that last 7th seed with 41 points. But Inter Miami would own the tiebreaker based on number of wins. New England, 2 points ahead of Inter Miami, just out of the playoffs at 38, with Inter Miami at 36. Now, there are still other teams that have been allowed to sort of get back in the mix here. Atlanta on 36, Charlotte on 35, even Chicago now on 35. Toronto still hanging out. They're probably out of it at 34. So Inter Miami really did have the opportunity to be much closer to Orlando than they are to Chicago or Toronto. Now you can't cry over spilt milk. You are in the position that you're in. The thing is here is a draw is almost as bad as a loss at this point, because being 5 points out with 4 to play, it would really require a miracle for Inter Miami to be able to get in. That's what a draw would do. A loss is pretty much game set match. You'd be 8 points out with 4 to play. That's just too monumental of a task to overcome. So you're really looking at a must win here against a Columbus team that, mind you, has been prone to not starting their big players in midweek games, right? Lucas Zelarayan did not start in the other leg against Inter Miami, also a midweek game. So, both him, Cucho, Diaz, and Etienne started for Columbus in their 2-2 draw at Montreal over the weekend, a game in which they looked for 85 minutes the better side. Columbus was dominant in that game, and really for an untimely red that really had everything fall apart at the end there to Dia. So they really should have come away with 3 points, since Miami's actually pretty lucky that they didn't. So knowing that is the case here, that even maybe goes to your point, Austin, of needing a more attacking lineup here. Clean sheets. I know we keep talking about who's in goal and whether or not you agree with that situation. We've talked about it. We've expressed our feelings on it. I honestly don't even think it matters anymore, because you have to score goals. That is the name of the game right now. There is no point in clean sheets. It needs to be 2, 3, 4 goals. And if it's a 4-3 game, that's fine. But you just need to score. That's the name of the game right now.
Can I just go on and tell you what my ideal lineup is then?
Sure.
So I'm starting Drake Callender. I know it's not going to happen, but if I'm Phil Neville, I'm starting Drake Callender. I thought that Marsman should have maybe had a couple saves in the Chicago match, but that's just, I could say the same thing about Callender in the Red Bulls match, so I'll leave that aside. I think that you do play a 5 at the back or 3 center back formation. I think it should be Saylor, McVeigh, and Mabika. I would probably assume Mabika in the middle. He's used to that role when he's come into the starting lineup in a 5 at the back. So I would say Mabika in the middle. I would have Robert Taylor as a left wing back. I would have Yedlin as the right wing back. I'd have Mota and Gregory in the middle of the park, just because, Alex, you reminded me of that Portland game, talking about a dominant performance. I think that performance between those two guys in the Portland game went extremely unnoticed, and I haven't seen anything like that from them since that game, and they need to get back onto that. I know Monta's been scoring a couple goals. Gregory's still dominant, but together as a unit, they have not been as good as they have been since that Portland game. So I think that needs to be another avenue in which Miami steps up. And then I also agree, Alex. I think other than, I would say a 3-4-2-1 is ideal. However, I'm saying more of a 3-4-1-2, and I'm putting Lassiter instead of Duke, and I'm leaving Pozuelo there and putting Higuain up top next to Lassiter and letting Lassiter run up and down and ping in balls. That's just in my opinion, that's the best way to do it. You can link up Lassiter with Taylor on the left, or you can link up Lassiter with Yedlin on the right. I don't care what side he plays on. In terms of next to Higuain, he can shift back and forth in a little Carlos Vela type thing where you just have him running all over the pitch. I don't care what you do, but you need Lassiter's speed on the pitch. I know at times his finishing ability hasn't been there, but it's about creating chances. When you look at the last Columbus match, they only shot the ball 4 times and had 1 shot on target, and were held to 0 goals. So, in my opinion, you need to put your best weapons out there. And I think that with Yedlin there, with Taylor there, with Lassiter there, with Higuain there, Pozuelo, and then controlling the middle of the park with Gregory and Malta, if they can step it up, I think that's the perfect way to do it.
And I'd even call that a 3-4-3 or even like a 5-5, because with Malta going box to box, right? Just put Gregory defensively, put Taylor and Yedlin as attackers. You have to go on the forefront of this game, Alex. I mean, anything short of scoring early, really, it would be massive to just keep the pressure on. It has to be, and the crowd's going to be into it. They've got it. I know it's a weekday, and people are going to come straight from work. I understand that, but this is, Custard's last stand. This is where, everything has to be all there. This is it, right?
Cup final.
We've been saying it. We've been saying it and rolling our eyes a little bit, but now is really the case.
Yeah, they just have to go for it, really. No, like you can't continue to tinker. If a player just isn't working, why wait till the 60th minute to pull him? Do it at halftime. Yeah, it's do or die time for them.
Damian Lowe is day-to-day with an injury, so he could possibly he is possible to return. Barring that, I would say probably unlikely, given what we've seen with training and everything, that he'll play against Columbus, and almost more so keeping him for the weekend, which you still do have games possibly if he's able to go then. You do have Campana waiting in the wings as well. Do you risk running, or Coco as well? Do you risk any of these options? or are you still comfortable with what you have? Let's say Sailor, Mabika, McVeigh in the back. Are you taking any of those gambles with Campana, with Coco, with Damian?
I'm not personally. Especially not Damian and especially not Campana. I think that there's too much to be lost for both of those players in terms of re-risking an injury. And I think that if I'm looking at the other options in terms of what their counterparts are doing, I'm okay with a back line of Mabika, McVeigh, and Sailor as long as it's held up by a Malta Gregory midfield. I think that box that you talked about, Ian, that you alluded to is could be okay, and they can keep the ball in front of them. I think they did a lot for the majority of the Columbus match. They just couldn't capitalize on the offensive. And then speaking of the offensive, they haven't scored goals. Yes, maybe it'd be great for Campana, but I know that Phil Neville said a couple weeks ago it doesn't look like he's going to be as long as we said, yada, yada, yada. But there's been no real updates, and that for me is enough to say, yeah, he's probably not ready to go there, not too confident. And I think with the World Cup looming and him wanting to get there, Campana probably himself wouldn't necessarily want to go and re-risk anything. I think later on down the line, if Miami win this game and they have another cup final type game coming up and he can get healthier and healthier and healthier, yes, I can see him coming back into the fold. But for right now, I don't think that this is a game to do it for any of those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's any one that's going to risk it, maybe, I don't know. I think there's enough depth there, really. Damian Lowe is probably the biggest loss, honestly, but I wouldn't risk it.
Montreal is hosting Chicago, also New England traveling to Houston. The other two big games there where Inter Miami could really get help. But with 3 losses in a row, guys, just want to sort of understand the scope of the end of the year woes that have been going and how this needs to be fixed. Take you back to a year ago when Inter Miami was right in the mix of the playoffs, maybe a little further, right? So this losing streak started with 8 games to play. Last year, it started with 11 games to play, and Inter Miami finished 3-8 in those games. Now, with 8 games to play, they've dropped the last 3, but it also comes on the road. The final 6 road games of last year, Inter Miami was 1-5 in those games. In these road games already, they had the draw, which is great, but they're also now 0-1-3 with 2 road games to play. They're going to need to take care of business at home with Columbus, with Orlando, and with Montreal. And I think now they're going to need to win at least one of those 2 games with at DC or at Toronto. They've put themselves in this position, and it's frustrating to say, but Phil has come at this saying it was a cup final. When you lose cup finals, you're out of the competition. They're lucky that they're still in the competition. Now we're reaching the point where really, truly enough is, you can't get away with, this is a cup final, but we'll play for another day. No, if you really lose this one now, your cup final, you really lost. So I guess from that perspective, how do you flip the script? How do you get energized? What are you saying in the locker room as you're walking out to the sea of pink that hopefully will be there against the Crew? How are you getting motivated for this, to believe, to have that fight that we saw back in August, that we saw through that run that really made everybody believe that not only could they do it, but it's not too long ago that we were saying that this team had the possibility of challenging a Red Bulls or challenging an NYCFC. I think we're a long ways away from that now.
Yeah, I think it's too far gone to say that they'll be challenging for that kind of a spot, but I do think that with a couple of goals, this team can turn a lot around. And it's just that they're not scoring, I guess, away from home, but even at home, I think that they need to do something here at home in front of these fans. If they score an early goal, like you talked about, Ian, I think that for me, that's enough to go on and probably win this match. And that's got to be part of the motivational speak. That's got to be part of just everything that's going on is, can you have the ruthlessness right now when it matters the most? I know Phil Neville loves that word in terms of ruthless. He loves it, loves it, loves it. I just think they need to score a goal. They need to score a goal, and I think that is more than enough for me to say, you know what, this is it. If they can go on and score and they can win this game, sure, we can look at the hopes again. But if they don't, even a draw, I don't see how this is a playoff team. And I think this is make or break. This game is genuinely make or break. This is the true cup final. After this game, I will vow to myself that I will not be looking at possibilities anymore for this team to make a playoffs, because I don't think they'll be able to do it.
And the thing that I'll be really looking for is the body language. That is always the biggest like X factor, especially with this team when their backs are against the wall. The body language seems to droop. The arms start flailing. The bickering starts to really get control back and really be in control of not only your emotions but in control of the pace of play, in control of your actions and how you're playing against a very solid Columbus Crew team that also since the Miami win has not lost. They drew against Chicago and drew against Montreal, a team that finds a way, as Phil said just a couple of weeks ago, not to lose. Inter Miami is going to have to find a way to make Columbus lose. Tuesday night, 8 p.m. from DRV PNK Stadium. Make sure you follow the Heron Outlet right here on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, please rate, subscribe, review. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the Heron Outlet. For producer Andres, she is Alex Winley. He is Austin Roblard. I'm Ian Hest, and we'll see you at DRV PNK Stadium later on this week.